Hey everyone, this is Greg with Spotted Tongue Woodworking, and in this video, I'm going to show you how I turned this 100-year-old baby grand piano into a bookshelf. Well, that is after I finish wrestling it off the pickup truck and bring it into my shop. Then I'll show you. This piano actually belongs to a neighbor several houses down the street from me. This was her childhood baby grand piano, and she didn't want to throw it out. It was no longer playable, could not be tuned, and she didn't know what to do with it. So, walking down the street, she saw me working in my garage and asked if I wanted to turn this piano into a bookshelf. Me being me, I said yes. Actually, before we moved the piano to this shop, and when we moved it into my garage, I actually had some help taking the metal harp out, which weighed itself several hundred pounds. Taking that out made the rest of this process a lot easier. First step was to remove the soundboard. It was glued on all around, so I had to use a sawzall to cut it out, and then I had to remove the support beams that ran across the frame of the piano. This step of the process really had me thinking, do sawzalls have a place in fine woodworking? Do they belong, or did I break a lot of rules? Either way, after removing the soundboard and cutting out the cross braces, I used a hammer and chisel to get rid of the rest of the soundboard that was glued to the inside lip of the frame of the piano. I did not expect it to be glued. It wasn't Titebond. They didn't have that in 1922, but it was still glued and still difficult to remove. With the rest of the soundboard and the cross braces removed, it was time to sand the interior and to prepare it for shelving. There was a lot of dirt, there were some scratches, a lot of things that just need to be cleaned up and addressed before moving on to the next step of putting it back together and putting in the shelves. I've said several times that this piano was 100 years old, but it goes to this Spangler 1022. I have no reason to expect it to be 2022. So one of the cool components of this bookshelf build is that we're going to incorporate the original keyboard from this piano, and what we're going to do is the piano builder that we are working with, he is going to put springs under each of the keys. So all of the keys will be playable, and we're going to put it back, in the bookshelf, sideways, so playable from the side. The problem that I run into is that this is too large. This back half comes into where I want the shelf to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually, to keep this playable, you need these to pivot. The pivot is right here. So I'm going to cut these, cut this whole thing, cut these all off at this knuckle, right here, all the way down, and that way this will go on the bookshelf, but then this part will not intrude onto where the shelves are going to go. And that's exactly what I did. I ran this keyboard on the table saw. There was a lot of metal, there was a lot of things that could have gone wrong, but I was able to measure it out correctly and run it down a path that missed all the metal, went through the wood, and cut it exactly where I want it to be. Well, almost where I wanted it to be. I was actually, about a ½ inch off of what I wanted, and as you can see, I brought it as close and tight to those metal pieces as I could in order to make sure that there was enough room in the piano for my shelving. I can probably guarantee you that you'll never see anything like this ever again, something like this cut on the table saw. And putting this part of the piano back together is a fairly straightforward process. There are a lot of pins and slotted screws that all fit together. All the pieces hold each other in together. The keyboard goes in, the keyboard cover goes in. The keyboard cover is what holds the blocks, which are what holds the keyboard. And I will be mounting the keyboard cover in an open position so that it would not be able to be closed. The keys will be accessible and visible for the remainder of their lifetime. Taking a break from the piano itself and moving on to the base that the piano will be sitting on, the pedals are an integral part of the entire build. They are very much meant to be front and center in the base, not exactly where they would be on a piano, but kind of where they visually would expect them to be in the piano if it were a bookshelf. So cutting the pieces for the base, it's a very simple base. We are going to have the pedals in the middle. I am gluing up leg blanks that I will be turning to make little mini stubby legs that will be at four corners of the base. And when I say turning legs, I mean I'm just making something around. By no means am I an expert turner, or I barely consider myself a novice turner, but saying that these legs were hand turned as part of this extremely custom, extremely one-off project, I couldn't think of any better way to do it. After finishing up turning all four legs, assemble the entire base, put it together, which is what assemble means, and then stain it. This obviously is not the same color as the piano. We will be layering multiple coats of stain to achieve that precise color. And on to the most important part of this build, the shelves. I found these incredibly wide cherry boards from my local hardwood supplier out in Dillsburg, Drake Hardwoods. He always has very interesting choices, very interesting pieces that always work well for these custom one-off projects. These boards, were wide enough that I did not have to glue anything up, and I was able to use them as is, plane them down to my thickness and basically put them right in place. Very, very, very convenient, and very perfectly well suited for this job. Did you know that you could mount a dado stack in a radial arm saw? I had seen it. I had never done it up until this time. I needed to cut these dados in this longboard. I couldn't think of a better way to do it, and it was amazing. I'm definitely going to be revisiting that again. After cutting the dados, putting that in place, I now have my shelving, cut them to length, and shape them to fit the curve of the piano. Run the boards through the drum sander to bring them down to the 3/4 thickness. Cut the outside return on the bandsaw, and then finish up the curve, finish it out with the sander, hit it with a 1/16 roundover with my router, and we'll be ready to start assembling and putting the shelves in place. And I know everything looks quick and easy on screen, on camera, but it took me a full day just to shape those four shelves to the piano, to cut them, to round out, to shape the curves, cut all the radiuses and all the ins and outs, and to get it to fit exactly where I wanted it to be. It's not quick, it's not easy. It takes time. This is a meticulous process, and you can't rush it. So I'm about to put this all together, and with these shelves is we want to have a back. Not a back that goes up the whole way, but just a little lip to keep things from falling off of the shelves. And the problem I'm running into is installing these shelves into this little box with this dado and these dados to slide this all in, and then to get the backs onto here that are going to overlap the back side of the piano, and they sit back right back in here, is I can nail them from behind, screw them, nail them, glue them from behind up to this point, and from here I can't get behind here. So what I did is I have wedges, and what we're going to do is when I set these in place, I'm going to glue the whole thing, and I'm going to use these wedges to hold this board in place here while the glue dries. That way it will be fastened, because I can't get a clamp back there, I can't nail or screw from back there, but I can use a little bit of a pressure fit to get these pieces to stay tight, I think. We'll find out. And much like my question earlier in the video about whether sawzalls have a place in fine woodworking, my question is, do nail guns have a place in fine woodworking? I could not think of a better way to fasten that false opening, that false casing to the piano other than with a couple brad nails. And getting everything fixed in place. We're going to sand everything before we stain it. So sand it with an orbital, go back over it with just a hand sanding across with the grain to get rid of any of the swirly marks. Take a vacuum, get all the dust off that we can, and we're going to start the staining process. The original stain that I was going to use was a pretty close match to the faded color of the outside of the piano, but I made a mistake. I didn't make a mistake. I cleaned the outside of the piano. I put some oil on it, and it darkened significantly, which ended up in me having to layer 8 to 10 different colors of stain to get a pretty close match with the cherry to the mahogany of the piano. Lacquer, clear coat on over the stain, and I had to fix a few of the keys. I used CA glue, black CA glue for the piano key, the black key, and then clear CA glue, super glue basically, to fix some of these keys that were peeling up. And that's it. Final wipe down of the piano, try to find a blend of all the colors together, and that's it. That's the piano. That is a baby grand piano turned into an upright bookshelf. If you've made it this far, thank you. I would love to hear from you in the comments below. Would you consider this to be fine woodworking? I'm really, love to hear criticisms or praise of the product. Either way, just to hear feedback. A lot of positive reviews from everyone on this, and I want your honest opinion. So please let me know, is this fine woodworking?